Hello everyone. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. Halloween wasn't a big thing where I grew up. The houses were scattered too far apart, and most people didn't even try. You'd see a bowl left out here and there, maybe one or two families who actually answered the door, but they always ran out early. By 8 o'clock, the streets were empty, but that year felt different. Halloween fell on a Saturday, which somehow made it more legitimate, more real. My mom said I could stay out until 9 as long as I promised to check in. I was out with these twins from school, Nate and Brian. They lived over on Archer Lane and basically adopted me for the night after my usual friends bailed. Their dad had helped them put together these ghost costumes, white hoodies pulled tight with blacked-out goggles underneath. They looked less like ghosts and more like something out of a science fiction movie, but it worked. I didn't have much of a costume myself, just threw on my black jacket and carried the same cracked plastic pumpkin bucket I'd been using since 2nd grade. We started behind Lincoln Elementary. The houses were closer together there, which meant less walking and more candy. There were other kids out too, mostly younger ones with parents trailing behind. We were finally old enough to go without adults, and that felt like a victory. Around 8:15, we were ready to wrap it up. Our buckets were maybe 2/3 full. Not bad for a quiet neighborhood. Nate was already sorting through his haul, tossing out anything he didn't like. Smart he is. Those weird peanut butter candies in the orange and black wrappers. That's when Brian pointed down this little street we hadn't noticed before. It was a cul-de-sac. Short. Just 5 houses. The street sign said Grey Stone Circle. None of us remembered it being there, and that was the strange part. I'd ridden my bike through that area all summer. I would have noticed it, but there it was, tucked behind everything else like it had been waiting. Every single house was lit up. Full Halloween decorations, plastic gravestones, motion sensor skeletons, fake spider webs. One house even had a fog machine running. It looked like a jackpot. We started at the first house. An older woman handed us popcorn balls wrapped in cling film. I wasn't thrilled, but Brian took 2. The next house gave us toothbrushes with cartoon stickers and tiny boxes of raisins. Brian called that one a war crime. The third house gave us full-size Snickers bars. We all said thank you at the same time, like a choir of sugar-starved kids. Then we came to the 4th house. No doorbell. Just one of those heavy old-fashioned knockers shaped like a lion's head. I grabbed it and knocked twice. A second later, the door creaked open. No one was there. No voices. No movement. Just open. Inside was this narrow hallway lit by orange string lights. On the wall next to the door, someone had taped a handwritten sign, "Take only one." There was a folding table just inside the doorway. 3 big bowls of candy sat on top. One had Reese's cups. Another was full of M&Ms. The last one had these little wax paper wrapped candies. Homemade toffee, maybe. Or caramel. The kind of thing a grandma might make for her church group. No one around. No spooky music. No props. Just the candy and the sign. Nate nudged me. "You first, dude." So I stepped inside, just far enough to reach. I looked over the bowls and picked a Reese's. Classic choice. The second my fingers touched it, all 3 bowls slid forward. Just an inch. I froze. I thought maybe the table was uneven, then they slid again. Smooth. Deliberate. Like they were on rails. And one of the wax paper candies unwrapped itself. I stood there holding the Reese's, my fingers locked in place. My legs moved first. I backed out, stumbled down the steps and ran back onto the walkway. Nate and Brian just laughed. They stayed in the doorway. I was shouting for them to come out, telling them something wasn't right, but they thought I was messing around. Brian picked up the unwrapped toffee and tossed it in his mouth, like he was making a point. That's when things went wrong. Brian's face changed. His eyes went wide. Really wide. Like something had snapped behind them. He grabbed at his throat, doubling over. At first I thought he was pretending, that it was just another prank. Then he made this sound. It wasn't a choking noise, not like gagging or coughing. It was this metallic rattle, like someone shaking a box of nails. It came from deep in his chest. He dropped to his knees, hands still clutching at his neck. And then he just stopped, still as a statue. Nate backed into the wall, eyes fixed on his brother, but instead of helping him, instead of calling for me or yelling for help, he just turned back toward the bowl and reached in for another piece. I didn't wait. I sprinted out of that cul-de-sac, ran past the school, cut across the field behind it, didn't stop until I got to the Chevron on Weller Avenue. I burst through the door, gasping, doubled over. The cashier looked up from his phone like I was a stray animal. I couldn't form words, just kept pointing back the way I came, trying to say my friends over and over. The cops showed up maybe 15 minutes later. One of them gave me a bottle of water while I sat on the curb, shaking. They found the house. Nate was still there, sitting cross-legged inside the entryway, surrounded by candy wrappers. The bowls were gone. The table was gone. The sign was gone. Brian was gone. And the house, empty. Not just no one home. Empty. Stripped down to drywall and bare flooring. No furniture, no rugs, no light fixtures. The kitchen didn't even have a fridge. It was like no one had lived there in years. According to county records, no one had. The place had been foreclosed on 5 years earlier. No utilities, no registered owner, no property tax payments since. The city hadn't even assigned it a trash pickup day. They checked Nate out at the hospital. Physically, he was fine. No injuries, no trauma. But he wouldn't talk. Couldn't talk. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Not a whisper, not a cough. Nothing. They scoped his throat, ran imaging, blood work, everything. No reason for it. He could nod, shrug, blink, even smile once or twice, but he never said another word. And Brian, gone, just gone. No body, no footprints, no trace. His parents put out flyers all over town, hired a private investigator. I overheard one of the cops say he was just another runaway, but I saw what I saw. The candy moved, the toffee unwrapped itself, and Brian choked on something that wasn't there. I tried to tell my mom. She thought I was traumatized, maybe trying to process grief in my own way. She never brought it up again. I told a therapist once during my sophomore year. She tilted her head, gave me this soft look, and asked if I'd had access to alcohol that night. I haven't gone trick-or-treating since. I don't hand out candy. I don't decorate for Halloween. I pull the blinds, turn off the porch light, and pretend the night doesn't exist. If I walk past one of those bowls with a Take One sign, I cross the street. That year, Halloween fell on a Sunday. Most of my friends had either aged out or were stuck at church events. I wasn't planning on doing anything, just a quiet night at home. But then my cousin Rowan came to stay for the weekend, and if there's one thing about Rowan, it's that he never let quiet nights stay quiet. We were the same age, but he was always the one with the guts. Louder, more impulsive, the kind of person who'd jump off a roof just to see how bad it hurt. So when he said, "Come on, let's go out just for old times," I didn't argue, not for candy. We weren't into that anymore, but just to wander, see who was still out, maybe mess around a little. By the time we finally stepped out, it was already close to 9. Most of the little kids had gone home. The air was cold enough to see your breath. The streets had started to empty out. We didn't have a real plan, just walked around the blocks near my place, half laughing at what was left, half deflated inflatables. fog machines still puffing into empty yards, the last few porch lights blinking out. Rowan kept insisting there had to be one house still handing out candy. "There's always one," he said. "Some sweet old lady who bought 5 bags and only had 3 visitors." Eventually, we ended up on a side street I didn't recognize right away. It was quiet, lined with these boxy old houses that all looked like they'd been stamped from the same mold. At the end of the cul-de-sac, there was one house with its porch light still on. Everything else was dark, curtains drawn, no porch pumpkins, not even the flicker of a TV. This one house didn't have any decorations either, nothing festive, just a plain, tired-looking porch with a light glowing steady over the door. From where we stood, we could see the front door was slightly open, not enough to see inside, just cracked. Rowan stopped and gave me that look. "Free candy or murder house?" I rolled my eyes. "Don't be an idiot." But of course, he was already halfway up the walkway. I followed him, a little nervous, but pretending not to be. There was a big metal mixing bowl sitting on the top step. At first, I thought it was full of candy, but when I looked closer, I saw it was all gum. That old kind, wrapped in black and orange wax paper, the kind our parents used to complain about. Rowan picked one up, sniffed it, made a face, and tossed it back in. "Seriously, who still buys this?" Before I could answer, we heard it. 3 knocks. Not outside. From inside the house. We both froze. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't random either. Just 3. Soft and solid, like someone knocking on a wall or a door somewhere deeper inside. Rowan turned to the crack in the door and said, "Hello?" No response. He stepped forward. The door creaked open a little more. Slow and steady, like someone was pulling it from the other side, carefully, like they didn't want to be heard. I told him it was weird, that we should go. He grinned, lowered his voice and called out, "Trick or treat." Still nothing. Then the knocking happened again. Louder this time. Closer. The porch light flickered once. Twice. And then stayed dim, like a dying bulb. Rowan leaned in, peering through the crack. I stayed where I was, just behind him. I couldn't see much, just a dark hallway stretching into black. He looked back at me and said, "Maybe someone fell or something." Then he pushed the door open and walked in. I didn't move. I just stood there, listening. Behind me, the street was dead quiet. No cars, no kids, no voices. Just the low buzz of that porch light and the faint rustle of dry leaves somewhere behind the house. Then I looked down at the gum bowl again. When we walked up, it had been full. Now it was half empty. At first, I thought maybe Rowan had grabbed a handful as a joke. But then I noticed the wrappers. They weren't sealed. Some were twisted open, just slightly. The pieces inside, most of them had already been chewed, flattened, bitten, teeth marks still clear, like someone had chewed them halfway and spit them back in. I whispered his name. No answer. Louder this time. "Rowan, come on." Still nothing. Then the door slammed shut. I jumped back. It was so sudden and sharp. It didn't even sound real at first. I rushed up and grabbed the handle. Locked. I twisted. Pulled. Kicked. Nothing. I started yelling his name. Pounding the door with both fists. Trying to force it open. No sound inside. No footsteps. No voices. I ran to the side window. Cut my hands around my face to see in. But the inside was pitch black. I could just barely make out the hallway. Maybe a stairwell. No Rowan. No movement. I bolted down the street and pounded on the nearest front door. A guy answered. Middle-aged man in sweatpants, holding a mug like I'd just woken him up. I tried to explain, fast and panicked, that my cousin had gone into this house and the door slammed and now I couldn't get in. He looked at me like he wasn't sure whether I was messing with him, but he grabbed his phone and followed me anyway. Flashlight on. When we got back, the porch light was off. The front door was wide open. The bowl was gone. No gum, no wrappers, just the empty doorway. He called out a few times, then stepped inside. I followed him this time, right on his heels. The place smelled dry, like old paper and dust. His flashlight cut across bare wooden floors and cracked wallpaper. No furniture, no signs of anyone living there. We checked every room. Nothing. He looked at me and asked if I was sure this was the right house. I swore it was. I could still see the faint circle on the porch where the bowl had been sitting. He called the cops. 2 officers showed up a few minutes later and did their own sweep. Room to room, they asked me the same questions on loop. Was I sure about the house, the time, what I saw? I kept saying yes, and they kept looking at each other like they weren't sure what to believe. My parents showed up. Rowan's mom and dad drove in from about 40 minutes away. The police brought in a search team the next morning. They went through the woods behind the cul-de-sac, the drainage ditches along the main road, everything. Nothing. One of the officers pulled my dad aside and told him the house wasn't even supposed to be accessible. It had been condemned after a basement fire a few years back. No one had lived there since. No working utilities. No listed owner. The lock had been broken long before that night. They asked again if I was sure. I said yes. But after a while, I could tell they didn't believe me. Not really. The longer Rowan stayed missing, the more people started thinking he ran off. Got in trouble. Took off on his own. His parents didn't buy that. Neither did I. But there was nothing else. No trace, no clues. Halloween decorations came down. The neighborhood moved on. I didn't. I kept thinking about that bowl, the knocking, the flickering light, the sound of the door slamming, wondering if he'd called out and I just didn't hear it. For weeks, I couldn't sleep. I kept dreaming about the house. The door slightly open, the light still on, that old gum waiting on the step. And always, I'd wake up certain I heard knocking, soft, somewhere behind the walls. The police stopped checking in. It became one of those quiet, cold cases no one talks about anymore, but I still go back. Every year on a Halloween night, I park at the end of that street, alone. I don't get out. I just sit there, windows down, watching. The house is still there, still condemned, still dead. Except that porch light. Every year it turns on again. Not bright, just a dull flicker, like it's thinking about going out. And always, on the top step, there's that same bowl. Not full. Just 1 or 2 pieces of that black and orange gum sitting right in the center. I never touch them, never go closer. But 2 years ago, I saw a little girl run up to that porch. White costume, maybe 8 years old. Just laughing like it was all a game. I yelled out to stop her, but she didn't hear me. She grabbed the gum. The porch light blinked twice, then went out. When I ran over, the bowl was gone. So was she. The next morning, same as always. House boarded up. No lights, no sign anyone had ever been there. I called the police. They came out again, looked around, took notes. Said the house had been empty for years. They didn't find a girl. They didn't find a bowl. They didn't find anything. But I know what I saw, and I know now, if that porch light ever turns on again, I'm not stopping. If you're still listening, you probably enjoy stories like this. A like or a comment helps keep them alive. My parents said I could go out on my own for the first time as long as I stayed close and came back by 9. That felt huge, like a rite of passage. I'd had my vampire costume ready since the week before. Long black cape, red lining, white face paint, and those plastic fangs that made you drool if you wore them too long. My candy bucket was one of those classic orange jack-o'-lantern ones with the flimsy handle. Everything was set. We lived in a small neighborhood, maybe 30 houses total. But everyone really leaned into Halloween. Lawns had inflatable pumpkins, giant fake spiders, gravestones with bad puns. You couldn't walk 10 feet without hitting a hanging skeleton. It was the kind of neighborhood where the PTA moms competed to outdecorate each other. Super safe. That's why my parents didn't worry. I hit the first few houses fast. By the time I got to my 5th or 6th, the sidewalks were still full of kids. Some with their parents. Some in little costume packs, shouting across lawns. A few classmates spotted me and called out, but I just gave them a wave and kept moving. I liked being on my own. More efficient, less talking, more candy. Eventually, I wandered a little further than usual and turned onto River Glen Drive. It wasn't technically part of the neighborhood, but I could see a couple porches lit up, so I figured it was fair game. Most of the houses were dark, porch lights off, no decorations. Easy skips. Then I saw this one house I didn't remember. Pale blue with a wraparound porch. The porch light was on. Jack-o'-lanterns lined the steps, and there was a chair by the door with a big bowl of candy sitting on it. Hand-painted sign. Take one. No car in the driveway. The place didn't look abandoned. Just kind of plain. Quiet. A single upstairs window glowed with yellow light. I stepped onto the porch and paused by the door. There was a window next to it, but it was too dark inside to see anything clearly. I glanced down at the candy. Those strawberry candies in the shiny red wrappers that always reminded me of old people. Not my favorite. But candy's candy, so I reached for one. Then I heard it. Not footsteps, not creaking. More like a slow, dragging sound. Like something scraping across the inside of the door, just inches from my hand. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. Controlled. I froze. Told myself it was probably a dog inside, or maybe the house was settling, like my parents always said when the floorboards popped. Then the doorknob turned. It wasn't a jolt or a twist, just a slow rotation, like someone had been gripping it quietly the whole time, and finally decided to test it. I took a step back, almost dropped my bucket. The knob twitched again. That was enough. I turned around and walked away. Not running, just fast walking. I didn't want to look like I was panicking, even though I kind of was. I got 10 steps down the walkway before I heard the door creak open behind me. Just a little. I didn't turn around. I kept going. Got to the corner, turned onto the next street, and told myself that was the end of it. Except it wasn't. About 10 minutes later, I came across another house with a candy bowl on a chair out front. Same strawberry candies. Same take one sign. Same handwriting too. But this house had a red door and a for sale sign stuck in the lawn. I remembered that house. It had been empty all summer. Nobody had moved in. I bent down to look at the candy, and that's when I saw it. Caught between 2 wrappers was a little shred of red fabric. Same exact color and texture as my cape. I hadn't been to this house. I hadn't even been on this street yet. That's when I finally looked behind me. The street was empty, except for one figure standing way down at the far end. Tall, too tall to be a kid. Dressed head to toe in black. No costume, no mask, no movement. They were just standing there, watching. I turned and kept walking. Faster now, still trying to play it cool. But my whole body was tense. I wanted to find people again, some other kids, maybe a parent out with a stroller, but every block I turned onto I saw the same thing. Another candy bowl. Same candy. Same sign, always on a porch with no one around. And always, somewhere in the distance, that figure in black. Still standing. Still watching. I started cutting through people's yards, trying to break the pattern. No more streets, just shortcuts. But every time I came out on the next block, there it was again. Another bowl, another porch. Same candies, and way down the road, the figure. I pulled out my phone, tried to call home. but the screen kept flashing back to the lock screen. I'd try to open it, and it would just loop back, over and over, like it was glitching. That's when I dropped the bucket and ran. I cut through a side yard and didn't stop. No plan, just running until I reached the edge of the neighborhood where the woods start. I figured I could cut straight through, pop out by the tennis courts near the main road. I'd done it during the day plenty of times, but once I got into the trees, something felt off. I couldn't hear anything. Not my own footsteps, not wind, not even the usual rustling of leaves, just silence, heavy and unnatural, like the air was pressing in. I started to feel like I wasn't even moving forward, like I was walking in place. Then I saw it again, right there at the base of a tree, a plastic candy bowl. Same kind, same strawberry candies. And on the ground next to it, one of my vampire fangs, broken in half. I didn't even realize I'd lost it. I screamed. After that, it's a blur. I remember branches scratching my face, tripping over roots, getting back up, just running with no sense of where I was going. Eventually, I stumbled out of the woods and landed hard on gravel. A porch light clicked on, and this woman came out in her bathrobe. She looked concerned, kept asking if I was okay. I couldn't get a word out. She ended up walking me home herself. We were almost 2 miles away from where I thought I'd been. My parents didn't believe any of it. They said I got turned around, freaked myself out. Probably saw some guy in a weird costume and panicked, but that wasn't it. That was the first year I went trick-or-treating by myself. My brother Mason had taken me every year before that, but this time he said I was old enough to do it alone. My parents were both working late shifts, and they didn't say no. We lived in a quiet neighborhood just outside a small town in western Illinois. One of those places where people leave bikes on the front lawn and still wave when they drive past. Halloween was a big deal there. I left a little after 6, right as the sun started to dip. Took a flashlight and an old pillowcase. No real costume, just a black hoodie and a plastic skull mask I'd grabbed from the gas station on the way home from school. I never liked the bulky stuff. Costumes that made it hard to run or got too hot under the plastic. I wanted to move fast and get as much as I could. By about 7, I'd done most of the neighborhood. My pillowcase was getting heavy with mini Twix, peanut butter cups, and those tiny boxes of Nerds. I'd planned out my route ahead of time. Stuck to the church map. Even doubled back on one block where I'd seen a lady giving out king-size Snickers. That's when I saw a street I didn't remember. It was just past an intersection I'd passed 100 times. No decorations, no carved pumpkins, no kids. But 3 of the porch lights were on, and in my 11-year-old brain, that meant open for business. I didn't even think about how it wasn't on the map. I just figured maybe I'd missed it. The first 2 houses didn't answer. I knocked, waited, even tried the doorbell once. Nothing. The 3rd one opened. It was an older woman, white hair pulled back into a low bun. She wore a beige cardigan and had one of those plastic bowls full of fun-sized Milky Ways. She smiled as soon as she saw me, like she recognized me from somewhere. "Come in, sweetheart," she said, tilting the bowl toward me. "We're handing them out from the kitchen." I just stood there for a second. Something about the way she said it felt off. Not creepy exactly, just weird, too familiar. "I can just take one here," I told her. Her smile dropped a little. Not completely, just enough to notice. "Well, all right," she said, and dropped 2 pieces into my bag. Then she slowly shut the door, eyes still on me, like she was giving me one last chance to change my mind. I remember walking away feeling strange, like I'd just turned down something I didn't fully understand. I looked back once. Her porch light was still on. The next morning, I tried to find that street again. I even asked Mason if he remembered it. Over by the end of West Drive, near the bend. He looked at me like I was making stuff up. I walked the whole route again after school. Every turn, every cross street. The one I'd found the night before wasn't there. A week passed. Things went back to normal. Homework, video games, dinner with Mason when Mom and Dad worked late. Then on Friday night, Mason invited me to go out with him and his friends. They were heading into the woods, behind our neighborhood. There's a trail out there that runs behind the last row of houses and cuts through the brush along a dry creek. Mason and his friends had been going out there for years, lighting fires, sneaking beers, doing whatever teenagers do when no one's watching. I'd never been invited before, so I said yes before he could change his mind. We left after dark. It was me, Mason, Kyle, and Drew. They carried flashlights, but didn't use them much. They were too busy joking around, pushing each other, laughing about things I didn't really understand. I trailed a little behind, trying not to look like I was struggling to keep up. About 15 minutes in, we hit a clearing. Mason stopped walking. "There it is," he said. I followed his gaze. Through a thin break in the trees, I could see 3 houses, identical to the ones from Halloween. Same distance apart, same slanted roofs, and the third one, the one on the right, had that same warm yellow light glowing on the porch. I felt like someone had kicked me in the chest. "I thought there weren't any houses out here," I said. "There aren't," Kyle said. Like it was obvious. We all stood there, not speaking. Then Drew walked forward, toward the house on the left. Mason told him to hang back, but he just waved us off. "Relax, they're probably just old cabins or something." I grabbed his arm. "I've seen that one. The lady was weird. I think something's wrong with it." He just laughed and kept walking. He knocked on the door twice, then looked back at us. Nothing happened. He reached for the handle and pushed it open, just a little. The door creaked, and right then, all 3 porch lights turned off. We froze. No one said anything, not even Drew. He leaned in just a little more, and vanished, not like he walked inside, not like he ducked out of view. 1 second he was there, halfway through the doorway, and the next he was gone. Like something reached out and plucked him off the face of the earth. Mason shouted and ran toward the house. I grabbed his hoodie and tried to hold him back, but he yanked away. He flung the door wide open. The porch light blinked back on. The inside of the house looked empty. None of us moved. Finally, I stepped back. "We should leave." Kyle didn't argue. He was already turning around. Mason hesitated for a few more seconds, staring into the open doorway like he expected Drew to step back out. I had to grab his arm again. Pull hard. That finally broke the spell. We ran. Branches whipped at our faces. Roots tripped us. At one point, I dropped my flashlight and didn't even bother picking it up. We didn't stop until we were back at the edge of the neighborhood. Standing under the first street light we saw. We didn't talk about it that night. No one said a word on the walk home. Mason and Kyle sat in Mason's room until the sun came up. I watched them through the crack in the door. Neither one speaking, just staring ahead like they were waiting for something to catch up with them. The next afternoon, Drew's mom called the police. He hadn't come home. We said we hadn't seen him since school. Cops walked the woods. They brought dogs. Nothing. They even brought a drone at one point. Same thing. Just trees and dead brush and an empty creek bed. I was renting the upstairs unit of a duplex off Maple Ridge Drive, just outside of Eastford, Pennsylvania. Kind of a nowhere town, mostly old homes and gas stations. I was finishing school online and working nights at a gas station just off Route 32. Didn't have a lot of time or energy for anything else. Since I had the night off, I figured I'd at least show some basic effort for the trick-or-treaters. I stopped at Doran's market the day before and grabbed a few bags of candy. The decent kind. Nothing with raisins. I didn't bother decorating, just tossed on an old flannel, grabbed a beat-up orange plastic bowl I found under the sink, and sat on the front steps with the candy in my lap. By 6, things were in full swing. Kids were darting between houses. Parents stood in little clusters near the curb. Someone down the block had a speaker blasting cheesy Halloween music. It was actually kind of nice. One of those things you don't realize you missed until you're sitting in it. The kids were the usual mix. Princesses, superheroes, some homemade Minecraft-looking boxes. I recognized a few faces from the neighborhood, but most were from other parts of town, probably because Maple Ridge was known for giving out full-sized candy bars, though I wasn't contributing to that legend. After about an hour, the bowl was getting light. I figured I'd shut it down soon. Started giving out 1 piece per kid instead of a handful. The international sign for "wrap it up." Then the tall kid showed up. He came alone. No parents hovering nearby, no siblings trailing behind. Just walked straight up the porch steps like he knew where he was going. He was taller than the others, probably high school age. But it was hard to tell with the mask. It was the mask that made me uneasy. Looked homemade, and not in the fun arts and crafts way. It was this stiff, rough-looking papier-mâché face, almost realistic, but everything was wrong. The eyes were too far apart. The forehead was huge. The mouth looked like it had been painted on as an afterthought. Just a tight, crooked line. It gave the whole thing this uncanny, almost sick lie look, like someone tried to make a person from memory, but got the details scrambled. I held out the bowl and said, "Take one, bud." He didn't move, just stood there, head tilted slightly. I looked past him, expecting to see someone else waiting at the sidewalk. Nothing. No one nearby. The street had thinned out. "Hey," I said, firmer this time. "You good?" He raised his right hand slowly, like the way someone might reach for a candle they're not sure is lit. Then he pointed at the bowl. I nodded, thinking maybe he was shy or nonverbal. "Yeah, go ahead." Instead of taking a piece, he tipped the whole bowl, just turned it upside down with one smooth motion and dumped the entire thing onto the porch steps. Then turned around and walked back down the steps without saying a word. No glance back, no pause. I didn't react right away, just watched him go. His eyes, posture didn't change. He walked with this strange calm, like he was following some invisible line no one else could see. Eventually, I leaned down and gathered the candy back into the bowl. Sat there for a few minutes trying to shake off the weirdness. Then I stood up, went inside, and turned off the porch light. Called it a night. I figured that was it. Some edgy teenager trying to be creepy. I made some food and crashed on the couch with the TV on. I don't even remember what I put on. Probably one of those dumb reality shows that require zero brain power. Around 9:30, there was another knock. Not on the door. On the front window. 3 knocks. I muted the TV and just sat there, listening. 5 seconds later, 3 more knocks. Same rhythm. Sharp. Low. I walked over and peeked through the curtain. 3 kids were standing on the porch, but they weren't trick-or-treating. No costumes, no candy bags, just plain clothes, hoodies, jeans, and they weren't moving. One of them was crouched right by the window, staring in through the glass. I couldn't make out the face clearly, but the eyes were wide. Too wide. I stepped back quickly, heart thudding. The knocking stopped. I waited there in the dark for at least 5 minutes, barely breathing, listening for any footsteps or whispers. Nothing. Eventually, I turned the TV back on, volume low, and tried to forget about it. Told myself it was just some older kids messing around, Halloween stuff. At 10:20, I heard it again, not knocks this time, dragging. It started faint, like something heavy being pulled across concrete, and got louder as it came closer. I hesitated for a second, then opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. The yard was trashed. Toilet paper in the hedges. A few eggs splattered on the porch rail, but that wasn't what got me. The bowl. It was sitting right in the middle of the yard, clean, full of candy. But not the stuff I bought. The wrappers were different. Faded. Some had names I didn't recognize. One had a cartoon logo that looked like it was from the 70s. Another had foreign writing, Russian maybe, or Polish. And then I saw him again, at the edge of the yard, near the bushes. Same mask, same stillness. This time I could see more of the costume. It looked like a scarecrow. Stitched shirt, old overalls, mismatched gloves. But the pieces didn't go together right. The clothes hung weird on his frame. The seams didn't match. It looked patched together, like someone tried to make a person out of leftovers. He didn't move, didn't blink. Just watched. I walked into the yard, grabbed the bowl and backed up slowly toward the porch. I didn't take my eyes off him until I was inside. I locked the door, dumped the candy into the trash, and tossed the bowl in after it. Felt stupid, honestly, like I was letting some prank get to me. But I couldn't shake the feeling in my stomach, that wrong, low-humming tension, like something was building. At midnight, footsteps on the porch. Steady, slow, then silence. Then a soft sound, like plastic being set gently against wood. I waited, counted to 60, then looked through the peephole. Nothing. I opened the door just a crack. The bowl was back, same orange plastic, same pile of candy, still full. On top was a folded piece of notebook paper. I brought it inside, locked the door, and unfolded the note. It said, "Don't forget to say thank you." I left the bowl outside and went to my room. I jammed a chair under the doorknob and didn't sleep much. The next day, I drove to a grocery store 2 towns over and dumped the whole thing, bowl, candy, note, into their back dumpster. Figured that would be the end of it. 2 nights later, I came home from my shift around 3 a.m. Flipped on the kitchen light. The bowl was in the sink. Clean, dry, same candy inside. That was it. I didn't even touch it. I just stood there for a long time, staring at it. The next morning, I emailed my landlord. Told him I had to break the lease. Paid the penalty. Packed my stuff. Moved to a tiny studio over in Langdon by mid-December. I wasn't doing it for the candy. It was more about keeping this dumb little tradition going with my best friend Owen. We'd been doing it since we were kids. And even though we definitely aged out of it, we kept showing up every year with empty backpacks and no costumes. Just a couple of idiots walking around, pretending it was ironic. It always felt like a half-joke. We'd roll our eyes at the decorations, grab candy from the bowls people left out, and talk about how much Halloween sucked. Now, I think we both knew it was probably our last year. We were seniors, and everything after that felt like it was already pulling us apart. That night started the same as always. Sidewalks littered with candy wrappers, half-lit jack-o'-lanterns, those dollar store skeletons swinging from porches. Most houses didn't even bother opening the door. Just a plastic bowl and a Sharpie sign. Take one. By about 8:30, most of the bowls were already empty. By 9, the neighborhood was dead. We were walking down Renshaw Drive, one of those winding streets where every house looks like a copy of the last. Beige siding, sagging mailboxes, porches that haven't seen fresh paint in years. You could barely tell which ones were still handing out candy. Most had already gone dark. We were about to call it when Owen pointed up ahead. "That one's still on," he said. There was a porch light. Yeah, but it wasn't orange or festive. Just a dim white bulb hanging over the door. No pumpkins, no cobwebs, No music or sounds from inside. Just a torn sheet of notebook paper taped to the railing. Take one. But there wasn't anything there. No bowl, no basket, no candy in sight. I was already halfway up the steps when Owen chuckled behind me. "Maybe it's inside," he said. "Go knock." I pressed the doorbell. No sound, no movement, just silence. Then the door opened a crack, not wide, maybe 4 inches. Just enough to glimpse a narrow hallway with hardwood floors and a small table near the wall. There was a bowl on the table, but from where I stood I couldn't see what was in it. Then a hand appeared. Thin fingers, pale skin, no face, no voice. Just a single hand slipping through the gap, holding out a full-size chocolate bar. Not the little ones, one of those big bars you get in a grocery store multi-pack. I took it. The hand didn't move. I kind of laughed, just a little. "Thanks," I said. But it just stayed there, waiting. Out of some weird impulse, I rang the bell again. Slowly, another bar came through the gap. Same hand, same stillness. I took that one too, and stepped back. "Guess they're feeling generous," I said, trying to keep it light. Then I actually looked at the bar. Something was off. The wrapper wasn't sealed. It had been opened and folded shut again. Not torn, just tampered with. Owen saw me staring at it. "Toss it," he said, already turning away. We cut through the trail behind the neighborhood, the little dirt path between the woods that shaved 10 minutes off the walk home. It was always a bit creepy at night, but we'd done it dozens of times. Trees on both sides, leaves crunching underfoot, the occasional rustle from a squirrel or whatever. But about halfway through, something changed. Not a noise exactly, just a shift, like the air behind us felt different. I glanced over my shoulder. There was someone on the trail, not running, not even walking fast, just following. They were covered completely by a white sheet. No eye holes, no mask, just fabric draped over them, smooth and still, head to toe. I slowed a little. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Do you see that?" Owen turned, then stopped walking. "All right," he said loudly. "Funny. Go home." The figure didn't react. It just kept walking, same pace, same distance. We picked up speed. So did it, not by much, but enough. Every time I looked back, it was closer, never running, just moving in that same steady rhythm. Neither of us said anything after that. We ran. Once we hit the sidewalk near my house, we sprinted, cut across my front lawn, slammed the door shut behind us, locked it. We didn't speak for a while, just went upstairs to my room and stayed near the window. Owen kept peeking through the blinds like he was expecting something. "Probably just a prank," he muttered after a while. "Someone messing with us." I nodded. That made sense. It was Halloween. People pulled dumb stunts. We ended up playing video games, picking through the candy that didn't look weird. By midnight, it felt like we were back to normal. Then Owen looked out the window again. He leaned in, squinted, and said, "Is that a sheet?" I stood next to him and looked. There was something in the yard, not standing, just lying there, right in the middle of the grass. A white sheet, folded neatly, like someone had dropped laundry. We watched it for over a minute. It didn't move. No wind, no sign of anyone nearby. But I had this tight, clenched feeling in my chest. Like if we opened the door, something would be waiting. We didn't sleep. By the time the sun came up, it was gone. I asked my mom if she'd seen anything weird outside. She just looked at me funny and said no. I didn't push it. Owen and I agreed not to tell anyone. We went back to school, pretended things were normal, but the feeling stuck. A couple weeks later, I was walking back from the gas station. It was early evening, not even dark yet. I noticed something on the grass near the sidewalk, just a small piece of white fabric. Could have been anything. A napkin, an old sock. But it was folded too cleanly, too intentional. After that, I started noticing more. Tiny scraps tucked under bushes, a strip of white cotton caught on a fence. Always just near where I'd walk. Never big, never obviously anything, but they kept showing up. Halloween came around again. I stayed home, lights off, curtains closed. At 1:15 in the morning, someone knocked on the door. Not loud, just 3 soft knocks. I stood in the hallway for a long time listening. No footsteps, no voice. Nothing. I didn't open it. In the morning, the porch was empty, but the mailbox wasn't. Inside was a single chocolate bar, unwrapped. I took it straight to the kitchen, tossed it in the sink, soaked it in lighter fluid, and burned it. The wrapper turned black in seconds. I kept the water running for an hour afterward, just in case. After that, I stopped answering the door on Halloween. I don't even let it ring. Last year I booked a motel in Granbury, halfway across the state, paid cash, left my phone off, didn't tell anyone where I was. At 1:14 a.m., I heard it again. 3 soft knocks. I waited until sunrise before checking. No one was in the hallway. The front desk said no one else had checked in on my floor. I moved again after that. Different town, different name on the lease. I haven't spoken to Owen since our sophomore year of college. Our neighborhood wasn't exactly a Halloween kind of place. It was quiet most nights, the kind of street where people waved at each other but didn't really talk. A few houses put up decorations, plastic spiders, paper ghosts. But that year, I noticed more porch lights on than usual. My mom said maybe people were trying to bring back the spirit of things. She sounded happy about it. I was just excited that she said I could go trick-or-treating alone for the first time. Technically, I wasn't supposed to go by myself. My friend Trevor and I had planned to meet at the corner of Pine and Ash. I waited there for a while, my candy bag folded under my arm, watching a few other kids walk by in groups. The air felt cold enough to sting when I breathed. And I remember thinking maybe Trevor was just late, but after a few minutes it was pretty clear he wasn't coming. I figured, well, I'd already made it this far. Might as well start. The first few houses were pretty normal. Plastic pumpkins, fake cobwebs, and a lot of those little fun-sized candy bars. I got a full-size Snickers at one place, which immediately set a high bar for the rest of the night. There was something comforting about the routine of it. Walk up, say trick or treat, get candy, move on. It was easy, predictable. Then I turned down Clover Drive. That street felt different. The air was stiller, quieter. I don't know how else to put it. The street light at the end was flickering in these weird, slow intervals. Like it was on a timer, and there was one house that stood out. Not because it was super decorated or anything. It just looked deliberate. Pumpkins lined the steps, but their faces were wrong. The cuts weren't triangles or circles, just long, thin slashes that ran vertically down the faces. They didn't look angry or happy. They just looked off. There was a handwritten sign taped to the door. Please knock. Bell broken, so I did. A few seconds later, the door opened. And a woman stood there. She was wearing what I thought was a nurse's costume, but it didn't look like something from a store. It was old-fashioned, like something from a black and white movie. Pale blue dress, white buttons, stiff fabric. Her hair was pulled back too tightly, and her lipstick was crooked, like she'd put it on in a hurry. She looked at me for a few seconds before she finally said, "You're early." I smiled awkwardly. "Trick or treat." She held out a small ceramic bowl. Inside were peppermints, the kind they hand out at diners or the dentist's office. Not even wrapped candy, just peppermints. I took one because I didn't know what else to do. Then she said, "Come in and wait." I kind of laughed, thinking maybe she was joking, but she didn't smile. "I'm not supposed to go in," I said, trying to sound polite. She didn't respond, just turned and walked deeper into the house, leaving the door wide open. As she moved down the hallway, I caught a glimpse of her reflection in a mirror hanging on the wall. That's when I noticed it. Her legs, they weren't moving the same way they had when she walked away. They were bending wrong, out of sync with the rest of her body. Like her reflection had a mind of its own. That was enough for me. I stepped off that porch so fast I almost tripped. I didn't run. Not yet. But I couldn't shake that image out of my head. I told myself it was just bad lighting, maybe a warped mirror, but the thought followed me for the rest of the block. The next few houses helped calm me down a bit. A man dressed as a pirate gave me Twizzlers. A lady in cat ears dropped mini Kit Kats into my bag and called me sweetheart. It felt normal again. Until I got to this house with no decorations at all. The porch light was on, but the windows were dark. A man opened the door holding a box of raisins. He looked tired. He handed me one, smiled like he was trying too hard, and said, "Watch out for the twins." I blinked. "What twins?" He didn't answer. Just closed the door. It was 8:15 when I realized I'd looped back toward Clover Drive again. I didn't mean to. It just sort of happened. I was going to skip it. But then I saw someone sitting on the porch steps of that same house, the one with the weird pumpkins. It was a kid dressed as a firefighter. He had the plastic helmet, the reflective stripes on the jacket, even a little toy axe clipped to his belt. He looked younger than me, maybe 7 or 8. "You trick-or-treating too?" I asked. He stood up and nodded. "They're giving out toys at the yellow house," he said, pointing down the street. I looked around, but it was too dark to tell which house was yellow. "Come on," he said, already walking. I followed him. He seemed sure of where he was going. We passed a few houses, all of them with lights on but no decorations, until he stopped in front of one that looked completely plain. "That one," he said. The porch light was dim. No pumpkins, no fake cobwebs, nothing. Just a doormat that said, "Welcome." He knocked once and stepped back. The door opened almost immediately. A man stood there in a bathrobe, breathing hard like he'd just run up the stairs. The firefighter kid looked at him and said, "He wants to see the toys." The man stared at me. "I don't have kids," he said. His voice cracked a little. "You need to go." Then he looked past me, like over my shoulder, and his whole expression changed. He whispered something I couldn't hear and slammed the door. I turned around to ask the kid what that was about, but he was gone. No sound, no footsteps, no movement. Just gone. I stood there longer than I probably should have, trying to figure out if this was some elaborate prank. The night felt heavier somehow, like all the air around me had thickened. Eventually, I started walking again. I told myself I'd hit a few more houses, then head home. That's when I found the cul-de-sac. It wasn't far from where I was. Just a short side road I hadn't noticed before. 6 houses in a circle, all with their porch, lights on, all perfectly lit, like they were waiting. The first house had the front door open a crack. Inside, I could see a bowl of candy on a little table just inside. I hesitated, then reached 1 foot over the threshold and grabbed a piece. The second my hand touched it, someone coughed behind the door. I didn't look. I just backed out slowly and left the candy sitting there. The next house had a handwritten note taped to the door. "Ring bell, count to 5, then enter." I didn't even go near it. At the third house, a man opened the door wearing a sweater with a jack-o'-lantern on it. He smiled, dropped a roll of Smarties in my bag, and said, "Cute costume." "Thanks," I said. "You've had a lot of kids tonight." He frowned a little. "You're the first." I glanced back at all the porch lights glowing around the circle. "Really?" He nodded, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Are you here with them?" "With who?" He looked over my shoulder again, then shook his head. Never mind. The door clicked shut. I remember standing there, the cold starting to bite through my jacket, thinking I should just head home, but something about the silence kept me rooted there. The fourth house had two skeletons sitting side by side on a porch swing. When I walked past, the swing creaked once. Even though there was no wind, I could swear one of the skeletons' heads turned toward me. I didn't stop. At the fifth house, I saw a kid in the upstairs window. They were standing perfectly still, staring down at me. I waved, feeling stupid for doing it. They didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, pale and motionless. The sixth house was different. A large mirror hung on the front door, nailed there. No decorations, no candy bowl, just the mirror. I looked at it and froze. I didn't see my own reflection. Instead, I saw a row of kids standing behind me. Different costumes, ghosts, clowns, animals, but all still, all watching. My breath caught in my throat. I spun around, expecting to see them, but the street was empty. Just empty houses and that flickering light from down the block. When I looked back at my bag, it felt heavier. Too heavy. I opened it. The peppermints were back. Not one or two, dozens, layered under my candy like they'd been there all along. I dropped the bag. Then I ran. I didn't stop at the end of the cul-de-sac. Didn't stop at the next corner. Didn't even stop when my flashlight went out. I just kept running until I saw the glow of my own porch light. I pounded on the door until my mom opened it. She looked terrified when she saw me, gasping and shaking. She sat me down, got me water, and tried to calm me. When I finally caught my breath, I told her everything, every detail I could remember. She listened quietly, then asked, "Did Trevor show up?" I said, "No." Her face changed. "That's strange. His mom said you came by earlier, said you picked him up." I shook my head. "He never came out." She called his house. No answer. Trevor's family moved. Away 3 weeks later. No one ever said why. After that, my mom never let me go out on Halloween again. Our town had this stubborn tradition of only doing trick-or-treating on the actual day, no matter if it was a school night or not. My mom had to work late, so she let me go out with my best friend Eli and his older brother, Marcus. Our neighborhood was small, just a bunch of looping streets that twisted around each other like a figure eight. It wasn't like we were covering a huge area. We knew every house, every shortcut, and every cranky old guy who didn't hand out candy. The one rule was to be back by 9. By 8:30, we'd cleaned out the entire east side, but I still had energy. Eli did too. Marcus didn't. He looked over it, tired and maybe a little irritated that his Monday night was spent babysitting 2 sugar-high kids. Still, we convinced him to let us cross over to the West Loop. That's when things started feeling weird. Most houses had already shut down, lights off, decorations unplugged, but then we passed a place I swear I'd never seen before. It was tucked behind this tall hedge that curved around the yard like it was trying to keep people out. The gate was open. Real candles, not the fake electric ones, lined the path to the front door, dripping thick orange wax down the sides. "Was this house here last year?" I asked. Eli shook his head. "Never seen it." Marcus didn't say anything, just stood there on the sidewalk, staring at it like he was weighing whether to say something or just pretend it wasn't our problem. The house looked old, not run down, just old in that way where you could imagine people living there 100 years ago, posing stiffly for photos. But the windows were glowing, not from light bulbs. Candles again, real flames flickering behind the glass. Marcus stayed on the sidewalk. Eli and I went up to the porch. The boards groaned under our feet, the kind of sound that makes you freeze for a second just to make sure nothing breaks. There was a single bowl sitting near the door. It looked like metal, but not the shiny kind. Dull gray, kind of like something from a museum. Above it, a little note was taped neatly to the door. Take one, leave one, trick trouble. There weren't any empty wrappers in the bowl, just these weird little candies, each wrapped in pale orange wax paper, twisted at the ends like old-fashioned taffy. We just stood there for a second, looking at it. Eli shrugged and took one. I hesitated for a beat, then grabbed one too. He pulled a crumpled stick of gum from his hoodie pocket and dropped it in the bowl. I didn't have anything extra, just what I'd already collected, and I wasn't about to give up anything good. Still, I figured a mini Twix wouldn't hurt, so I tossed that in. When we got back down, Marcus was still frozen in the same spot. "You guys done?" he asked, not looking at us, just past us, toward the porch. We nodded, a little confused. Then we started walking home. A few houses down under the next street lamp, I noticed something was off. My bucket felt lighter. I stopped and checked. It had been almost full when we left that porch. Now it was maybe half. All the good stuff was gone. The chocolate bars, the packs of cookies, just a bunch of suckers and hard candy left. "What the hell?" I said out loud. "Someone stole my candy." Eli checked his bucket too. "Same thing." Marcus turned to us. "You guys took candy from that bowl?" We nodded. "And you left something in it?" "Yeah," Eli said. "Just junk candy. Gum. A Twix." Marcus sighed. Not annoyed. More like disappointed. "You were supposed to leave something you actually liked," he muttered. He didn't explain. Just started walking faster. When we got to his place, he told us not to eat anything we got from that house. Not even touch it. I dumped my haul on his bedroom carpet and pulled out the weird wax-wrapped candy. No label, no brand. Just a soft little lump wrapped in paper like someone made it by hand. "What's the big deal?" I asked. Marcus stared at it. Real serious. "You know about the house on our street?" I shook my head. "It only shows up once a year, Halloween night. If you take something, you have to give something you actually want. Otherwise, it takes more." Eli snorted. "Okay, that's a little dramatic." But he didn't laugh. And Marcus definitely wasn't joking. We didn't talk about it after that. Until the next morning. That's when I realized my phone was missing. Not just misplaced. Gone. I checked my room, my backpack, even under my bed. Nothing. I asked my mom if she'd seen it. She looked confused. "You don't have a phone," she said. I thought she was messing with me, but she kept going. "We said you could get one next year. Remember?" I did not remember, because I'd had that phone for 6 months. I had photos from summer camp on it, videos of her cat, texts from her. I described it. She got irritated. "You've been asking for a phone since spring," she snapped. "We've said no every time." I called Eli, hoping he'd back me up. But there was this long pause. Then he said, "Wait, you had a phone." "We used to play games on the bus together." I showed him YouTube videos. He had seen it, but now it was like none of that had ever happened. That was just day 1. By Friday, my bike was gone, then my game system, then the green hoodie I wore basically every other day. It wasn't just stuff disappearing. It was like they'd never existed. No one remembered them, not even me. Eventually, I'd reach for something and realize I didn't even know what I was looking for. Except for the candy, that wax-wrapped thing still under my bed. I never touched it, didn't eat it, didn't throw it away. I just left it there, like I was waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. Not until exactly a year later. Halloween again. I was 13 now, way too distracted to care about trick-or-treating, but sometime around 8:45, I looked out my bedroom window and froze. The hedge was back. So were the candles. Same house, same glow. I don't even know what made me move. I just grabbed the candy from under my bed and ran. Everything was the same. Porch, bowl, note, take one, leave one, trick trouble. I dropped the wax-wrapped candy into the bowl and said quietly, "Here, you can have it back." Then I went home. My phone was on my desk. My hoodie was draped over my chair. My game system was plugged in, blinking with a low battery warning like it had been left on the whole time. Everything I'd lost was exactly where it should have been. I was out with my little brother, Milo, who was 10. Mom said I could meet up with my friends after if I took him around for an hour first. Which was fine. Milo was easy. He never ran off, always wore the same Spider-Man costume, and didn't complain unless his mask got too sweaty. I threw on a skeleton onesie over my clothes because it was cold. Not because I was trying to impress anyone. We lived in this quiet suburb outside of Dayton. Fair Haven, if that means anything to you. It wasn't spooky. Just rows of beige houses and cul-de-sacs with names that sounded like they came from a Halloween Mad Libs book. Ours was Coffin Court. Yeah, really. Down at the far end of the block, there was this one house everyone called the Massey Place. No one named Massey lived there anymore. But the name stuck. The lawn was always clipped short, but the windows were covered from the inside, and the porch light never came on. Not for holidays. Not for anything. No one ever answered the door. Some kid said an old guy lived there but never came out. Someone's older brother claimed he used to work in a morgue, or was a coroner or something. All rumor. No one had proof. Just a quiet, strange house at the edge of our route. By the time we looped back around that night, Milo's bag was nearly full. I was texting my friend Camille to meet up when he stopped walking and pointed. "What about that one?" he asked, staring at the Massey Place. "It's dark," I said. "They're not doing candy." But what if they are this year? Maybe they're just trying to be creepy. Highly doubtful. Still, he started walking toward it. I didn't want to get into a whole thing. So I followed him, thinking the door would stay shut and we'd just move on. No decorations, no pumpkins, no spooky music. But there was a mixing bowl on the porch. Metal, dented, like something out of a kitchen drawer. It was resting on a wooden stool with a scrap of paper taped to it. The note just said, "Take 2." Milo reached in and grabbed a mini candy bar. Then he reached again. I didn't want anything. But I peeked into the bowl out of curiosity. It wasn't full of candy. Just a few pieces left, gold foil-wrapped chocolates that looked kind of familiar but off somehow. The shine was dull, and they didn't have any logos or branding, just smooth foil. Then I noticed the bowl was sitting on a cutting board, which was weird, right? And under the board, there was a black trash bag, like the kind you use for yard waste. On the edge of the cutting board, near the bowl, I saw this reddish-brown smear, streaked along the grain like something sticky had dried there. "Hey," I said, "we're done. Let's go." Milo didn't move. He was still looking into the bowl. "There's like hair in here," he said. That was enough. I grabbed his wrist, and that's when the porch light flicked on, bright and sudden, no buzz, no flicker, just click. And the light was on, sharp and white, throwing our shadows up against the siding. The door creaked open, right behind the bowl. There was a man standing there. Older, maybe early 60s. He had on a bathrobe, the kind with the collar folded over like a hotel towel. He was pale, with neatly combed gray hair, slicked back like he'd just gotten out of the shower. He didn't say anything, just stood in the doorway looking at us like he wasn't entirely sure who we were. Not confused, just trying to place us. Milo stepped behind me. "Thanks," I said, voice a little shaky. He only took 2. The man gave a small nod. But his eyes didn't shift. Not to the bowl. Not to Milo. Not even to the door he was holding open. He just stared, expressionless, like a guy trying to remember the last time he saw a face like yours. After a long pause, he said, "Happy Halloween." The words were flat. Not mean, just distant, like he was practicing a phrase he'd never used out loud. Then, without any hurry, he closed the door. We backed off the porch. I didn't say anything until we turned the corner. "Did he smell weird to you?" Milo asked. I didn't smell anything. I did, like bleach. He paused, and the candy tasted funny. "You ate it?" He shrugged. "Just one." He still had the second one in his hand. I took it from him to look closer. The foil wasn't glossy, kind of matte, and totally blank. No label. No little square of paper sticking out. Just gold foil over a small square chocolate. Shiny smooth, and way too perfect. On one corner, I saw a tiny dent, like someone's thumb had pressed into it a little too hard. I rewrapped it and shoved it in the front pocket of my hoodie. Later, when I met Camille at the park, I told her the whole thing. She rolled her eyes and told me I was being dramatic. But even she knew the house. Everyone did. The next morning, I got curious and looked up the address. Figured there might be some history or complaints or something. But nothing came up. No recent sales. No incidents. Just a property record and a name I didn't recognize. That week, I brought the candy to school. My chemistry teacher, Mr. Sterlam, was always down for weird side projects. So I asked if he could test it. He agreed. Said he'd check it out after school. Probably just homemade chocolate. He figured maybe a hobby thing. He asked where I got it. I told him. The next day he didn't show up, or the day after. By Wednesday the school sent out a notice saying Mr. Sterlam had taken emergency leave. No explanation. That Friday I told my mom I had a headache and stayed home. Around lunchtime, I saw this plain white van parked outside the Massey house. 2 people, man and woman, both wearing those gray, shapeless jackets you only ever see on people who don't want to be remembered, got out and walked up the porch. They knocked, waited, then let themselves in. They were in there all afternoon. No lights came on. Around 7, they came out carrying 2 coolers and a cardboard box. One of them was wearing latex gloves. The bowl was gone. 2 days later, Milo got sick. Not just stomachache sick. He was out cold for almost a full day, slept through meals, didn't wake up even when we shook him. My parents thought it was just exhaustion from Halloween weekend. I knew it wasn't. I threw the candy away. Didn't tell anyone else. A few weeks after that, the house was suddenly empty. A moving truck showed up, but no one saw who packed it. It left around sunset. The house went right back to how it had been before. Quiet, blank windows. Porch light off. Exactly 1 year later, I went by again. Just to check. No lights on, no signs. But there was a bowl on the porch. This time it was wooden, carved like someone had made it by hand. No stool, no paper. Just the bowl sitting there. I didn't touch it, didn't say a word to Milo. That year I told him we weren't going out for Halloween. Said I was over it. He didn't argue. We live in a different town now. New school, new block, no weird houses. I was 11 when it happened. We weren't exactly the cool kids, but Halloween kind of leveled things out. For one night, it didn't matter if your sneakers were off-brand or if you had a retainer. If you showed up with a decent plan and an empty pillowcase, you could still walk home a legend. My mom worked nights at St. Helen, so she couldn't take me trick-or-treating anymore. She made me promise I'd stick to the Ridgewood neighborhood and stay with Milo the whole time. Before I left, she handed me a flashlight barely bigger than a lip balm tube and said, "Call me if anything feels weird." Not scary. Just weird. Okay, I told her. I will. Milo and I met up at 6, right as the sun dropped behind the treetops. It wasn't cold enough for jackets, so everyone was out in full costume. Little vampires, tiny witches, one kid dressed as a banana with a foam sword. Milo brought a hand-drawn map with stars on all the houses that gave out full-size candy bars last year. We followed it like it was a treasure map. After each stop, we raided the hall, updated our route, and moved on. By 8, we were winded, and our pillowcases were starting to drag. We'd already hit Ridgewood, Oak Hollow, Birch Street, the usual gold mine loop. That's when Milo said he'd heard about a hidden pocket of houses near Crenshaw Orchard. Said no one ever went that far out. And the people who lived there gave out extra candy to make up for it. Hidden houses, he called them. Trust me. It wasn't far. Just past the last row of townhomes and a couple blocks from Edison Middle. But as soon as we crossed Largo Drive, everything felt off. Not spooky exactly, just quieter. No lights, no decorations, no porch music or laughing kids, just a narrow sidewalk and these older houses set way back from the road. This feels like a waste, I said. Nobody's even out. Just one more block, Milo said. I swear I remember this place. We ended up at this 2-story house with a red tile roof and orange light glowing from the windows. No cobwebs, no pumpkins, just this clean little path leading to a skinny wooden door, and a hand-painted sign in wire to the front gate. Why, yes, we have candy. Try once. Milo raised his eyebrows at me. Told you. The doorbell was one of those round metal buttons, old-fashioned. When I pressed it, it made this flat, weird sound. Not a ding-dong. It was deeper, kind of hollow, reminded me of the noise my dog used to make when he was about to puke. A few seconds later, the door opened. This man stepped out. No costume. Just a long black housecoat that hid his knees and thick gold-rimmed glasses. His skin looked off. Pale. Grayish. Like he hadn't been outside in months. I couldn't guess his age. He could have been 60 or 100. You boys got lucky, he said. I was just about to call it a night. His voice was calm, but there was this weird precision to it, like every word was rehearsed. Then he stepped aside and held the door open. The front hall was lined with bowls, dozens of them, plastic, ceramic, even glass ones, each one piled high with candy, chocolates, gummies, lollipops, wrapped taffy, more candy than I'd ever seen in one place. Go ahead, the man said. Take a few handfuls. Last treat of the night. Milo didn't hesitate. He was already halfway down the hall, elbow deep in peanut butter cups. I stayed near the door. Something about the house made my neck tense up. It was too quiet. No TV sounds, no clocks, not even the buzz of a fridge running. Then Milo froze. He tilted his head and leaned a little forward. Is that someone down there? I followed his gaze. The hallway stretched way farther than it should have, like it bent the layout of the house. It just kept going. The last stretch swallowed in shadow, and in that shadow, barely visible, there was something. A shape, not moving, but not frozen either, like it was waiting. Then the man moved. Just a step to the left, enough to block our view. All right, he said too quickly. That's enough. Time to head on out. Milo looked at me. I looked at him. We left. The door shut behind us without another word. We stood there for a second, silent. That was weird, I said. Yeah, Milo said, breathless. Then he grinned and held out his pillowcase. But look, his bag was stuffed, way fuller than mine. I'm going to hit a few more around the corner, he said. You heading back? Yeah, park bench at 20. Deal. I watched him disappear into the dark, the glow of his skeleton suit fading as he walked away. 20 minutes passed, then 30. I called him. No answer. Tried again. Straight to voicemail. So I walked back to the red-roofed house. Only it wasn't there. No porch light, no sign. The gate was gone. Not broken or removed, just gone. Like it had never been there. I rang the bell anyway. Nothing. Knocked hard. No sound. I kept knocking until a light flicked on in a window next door. I bolted before anyone came out. Milo didn't show up. His parents thought he ran off. The cops figured he got lost and freaked out. I told them everything. The house, the man, the candy, the weird hallway. But none of it stuck. Because apparently, that house never existed. I mean that literally. There was no red-roofed house on that block. Neighbors swore they'd never seen a man matching my description. When the police pulled up satellite images, that address was just an overgrown lot, a patch of weeds and piles of old construction junk. Halloween came back around. I stayed home. Just went to the school party and called it a night. But every year after that, I go back to that block. I stand where I remember the gate being, where the path should have led up to that door, and every year, at exactly 8:47, I hear it. The doorbell. That flat, hollow sound, coming from nowhere. I don't knock back anymore. Some of these stories ended. Some never did. But if you made it this far, you know what I mean when I say Halloween isn't just costumes and candy. It's the moment you realize the door you knocked on shouldn't have opened. It's the street that wasn't there yesterday. It's the thing that follows you home and stays. Thanks for listening. If you survive the darkness, leave a comment and let me know where you're from. Because some of you might recognize these places. And if you do, maybe don't go back.